Good evening, everyone. This is Waterloo Mayor Dave Jaworski at the special council meeting of the City of Waterloo, Monday, September 13th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. in the evening. As we flip through here, continuing on our meeting from this afternoon, we move into the section 13, which is the public meetings. And first up is 13A, an informal public meeting. Let me grab my materials. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 13A, Z2108 for 310, 312, 314, and 316 Herb Street West. There will be no decisions made tonight. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Tonight's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a future meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, Rita Zylak, at 519-747-8650 or at rita.szilok@waterloo.ca. And before we get on to the planner, I've been reminded by a colleague that we have not yet done a roll call. And so let's begin the roll call. And first I'll check to see if Ward 1 is here. I do not believe so as yet. And we'll begin it with Ward 2. Councillor Botley, please go ahead.
Councillor Botley here.
And I think Councillor Veith is absent due to an appointment, so we'll go to Ward 4.
Councillor Freeman is present.
Councillor Henry present.
Councillor Bonago present.
And the mayor's here, so thank you very much for that. What's that? Oh, yes. So if anybody has a pecuniary interest on either of these items, please let us know at this time. Hearing none, the planner, Rita Zylak, will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Rita.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and members of the public. This is an informal public meeting for 310 to 316 Herb Street West, zoning bylaw amendment Z2108. The application was submitted by Van Legend Herb LP, represented here tonight by Jennifer Voss of JV Planning and Development Consulting. Next slide, please. The subject site is a 4-lot consolidation situated on the north side of Herb Street West between University Avenue West and Amos Avenue. In terms of surrounding lands, the subject site is surrounded by semi-detached homes to the north, spiritual use to the east, a triplex to the west, and an assisted living facility, low-rise residential apartments, and single detached homes to the south. Next slide, please. The consolidated parcels are currently occupied by single detached homes, as you can see on the pictures in this slide. Next slide, please. These are conceptual perspectives of the front of the proposed development. The applicant is proposing to build a 6-story apartment building on the site containing 93 residential units, 108 bedrooms, 84 vehicle parking spaces, and 58 bike parking spaces. Next slide, please. These are conceptual perspectives of the rear of the proposed development. For council's information, the height of the exposed parking garage wall that you see on these images ranges between 3.6 meters and 3.1 meters in height. Next slide, please. This is a conceptual site plan of the proposed development. The red dashed line represents the property line, and the blue dashed line represents the outline of floors 2 to 6, which cantilever over the surface parking lot behind the building. There are 2 vehicular entrances proposed, one at the east end of the site leading into the underground parking garage, and one at the west end of the site leading into the surface parking area to the rear of the site. Next slide, please. In terms of the official plan, the subject site is designated mixed-use medium-density residential, which allows for apartment buildings, a maximum density of 450 beds per hectare, and a maximum height of 20 meters. Next slide, please. In terms of the zoning bylaw, the subject site is zoned residential mixed-use 20, or RMU 20, which permits apartment buildings, a maximum density of 450 beds per hectare, and a maximum height of 20 meters and 6 stories. As you can see on the zoning map on this slide, the subject site is surrounded by the R1 zone to the east and the R4 zone to the north. These yellow zones are considered to be low-rise residential zones. Next slide, please. The applicant has requested to amend the existing zoning on the lands from RMU 20 to RMU 20 with site-specific provisions, including a reduced residential parking rate from the required 1.2 spaces per unit down to 0.9 spaces per unit, a reduced rear yard setback from the required 7.5 meters down to 1.56 meters to accommodate the exposed wall of the underground parking garage that I spoke of earlier. Now, the 6-story building itself would meet the rear yard requirement of the zone. In fact, the 6-story portion of the building is over 14 meters from the rear lot line. Another amendment being requested is a reduced low-rise residential lot line setback from 10 meters down to 3 meters on the east side and down to 1.56 meters on the north side, again, to accommodate the parking garage wall. A reduced northerly low-rise residential landscape buffer is also being requested, the bylaw requiring an average width of 3 meters, and the applicant is requesting an average width of 1.71 meters. Lastly, a reduced westerly side yard setback is being requested, the bylaw requiring 3 meters, and the applicant is asking for 1.6 meters to accommodate a retaining wall along a portion of the westerly lot line. Next slide, please. These are the reports and plans submitted by the applicant. All of this information is available on the city's website on our zone change applications webpage. The submitted information is currently under review by city and regional staff. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, staff will complete a review of the submitted reports and plans. Staff will assess whether the requested site-specific zoning provisions constitute good planning. Staff will consider any feedback received from the public, commenting agencies, city staff, and of course, any feedback received from council tonight. Then staff will prepare a staff report with recommendations to council, and will hold a formal public meeting for this application, at which point council will make a final decision on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Rita. Certainly lots to consider there in terms of the application. First up is Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Rita, for providing an overview. Just a signal for council, I will be asking the applicant's planner about the unit mix. For Rita, well, this is nominally a site plan kind of question. Given the relief being requested through the zoning bylaw, it's integrated. I am curious, given the reduced landscape buffer being requested along the northerly lot line, whether staff feel or certainly will be reviewing whether what's provided will be sufficient for really good tree growth. I think that's important, especially given the height of the retaining wall that you mentioned. Look for your comment on that.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Henry. Certainly, part of staff's review is the whether the space being requested at the rear, beside that, the underground parking garage, whether it's sufficient to plant vegetation to allow and to screen that retaining wall, given that it is substantial in size, and that's something that we're still reviewing. And I'll report back to council in my staff report, once I've had a chance to kind of flush everything out and review everything thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I appreciate that. And one more that I'd look for some report back on, and this is more nominally site plan, but that's from a lighting perspective, given that height difference. I know we tend to have lighting requirements done through site plan agreement, but certainly I would imagine glare and overlook from 3 meters high would be of interest to the abutting residents in terms of lighting and glare. So I trust that's also something that staff are reviewing as part of this application.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry. Lighting is something that is thoroughly reviewed at the site plan stage. And one of the basic principles and general principles that we abide by is that lighting cannot glare into adjacent lots. That's, usually we require that applicants or developers use full cutoff lighting. That's definitely something that we would look at through the detailed site plan process.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as noted, I'll have one question on unit mix for the applicant as well. So I'll turn it back over, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Henry. And you asked my question first regarding the underground parking, so thank you for that. I'll just wait for a moment to see if any other councillors have questions of clarification at this point. And seeing none, Rita, thank you very much. And I will now look at our registered delegations, and I think we only have one, and it's Jennifer Voss, JV Planning and Development Consulting. We'll just bring Jennifer in.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Jaworski and members of council. I have a brief presentation that will focus more on the details of the proposal to complement Ms. Silock's presentation and hopefully avoid duplication. I'm here tonight representing the developer, Urban Legend Developments and Vanmar Developments. Next slide, please. So as Ms. Silock had outlined, the proposal is for 93-unit, 6-story apartment building with 84 parking spaces in total. I would like to note that there's no reduction to the required number of visitor parking spaces proposed. So there would be 10 visitor parking spaces as per the bylaw. And one of those visitor parking spaces, we are proposing to designate for short-term 15-minute parking to accommodate deliveries. We would select a visitor parking closest to the lobby door, and that would be considered through our site plan application. Next slide. I'd just like to give you a little bit of the proposal history on this application. In November of 2019, ULD, the developer, they initiated investigation of the purchase of the subject lands. As part of its due diligence process, ULD submitted a major site plan application and corresponding minor variance application for the development of a 6-story apartment building. So the original proposal included a minimum street line setback of 4 meters, whereas 5 meters is required. The minimum 3-meter easterly low-rise residential setback, which is adjacent to the church property, which is whereas 10 meters is required. A 2.35 meter landscape buffer along the north property line, where, as Rita had mentioned, an average of 3 meters is required. And 25.8% minimum landscape open space, where 30% is required, and the minimum parking rate of 0.86 parking spaces per unit, whereas 1.2 spaces are required. Next slide. So when we submitted the site plan application, we had a site plan application meeting on February 25th of 2020. In March of 2020, due to the uncertainty at the time because of the pandemic, my client decided not to proceed with the purchase of the lands. The property, however, came back onto the market at the beginning of 2021 as a result of another developer who was investigating the purchase of the lands decided not to proceed. So ULD decided to purchase the subject lands at the beginning of 2021 and to initiate and to proceed with the redevelopment application of subject lands. So what we've learned from the original proposal, we have incorporated into our revised proposal. So at the time when we submitted our original application, staff advised that the reduced street line setback would not be supported, and that both the building setback and the underground parking structure must comply with the minimum 5 meter setback. So in recognition of this, staff at the site plan review committee meeting indicated that they were aware that the underground structure cannot fit within the front and rear setback limitations. So they advised that they would permit a reduced rear yard landscape buffer in order to ensure the 5 meter front yard setback was maintained, subject to the review of landscape details. The other thing we learned as part of our due diligence originally was that the region requires an estimated road widening of 3.2 meters. We also, as part of our due diligence, undertook a geological study, and the geological study identified a high water table and recommended establishing the basement floor level above the water table, which is resulting in that portion of the rear underground parking wall being exposed along the north property line. We also learned that retaining walls or walls greater than 0.6 meters above grade that are attached or form part of the building or structure are deemed to be part of the building in accordance with the city zoning bylaw. Next slide. So from the information and from the things that we learned on our original proposal, we went back to the drawing board. We refined the design of the proposal, and as a result, we reduced the number of required variances that were originally required to accommodate our original proposal. So in summary, the street line setback, we increased from 4 meters, which we were originally proposing, to 6.54 meters. And this was in response to staff advising that a reduced street line setback would not be supported. The increase in the street line setback created the smaller rear yard landscape buffer in response to providing more land at the front. We also learned that because of the zoning requirement, the rear yard is measured from the exposed wall of the underground parking garage rather than the building, which necessitates the what appears to be a major variance in terms of the setback, because we're measuring from the wall as opposed to the building. And again, the northerly low-rise residential lot line setback is measured from the exposed wall of the underground parking garage rather than from the building. Next slide. So in our new proposal, in the proposal that is before council, that will be before council in the future, We are requesting the reduction in the required number of parking spaces, as Rita had indicated. The reduction in the low-rise residential lot line setback from 10 meters to 3 meters on the east side, which I refer to as the church side, and 1.56 meters from the exposed underground parking garage wall on the north side. We're also requesting a reduction of the rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 1.56 meters, measured to the exposed underground parking garage wall. The proposed building is 14.7 meters from the rear property line. So this kind of gives you an indication of the extent of the somewhat technical variance that we require. We also require a reduction in the northerly lot rise, in the low-rise residential area landscape buffer from an average of 3 meters to an average of 1.71 meters, and a reduction of the westerly side yard from 3 meters to 1.6 meters to accommodate a retaining wall greater than 0.6 meters above grade along a portion of the westerly side, westerly lot line. And this is only the retaining wall that wraps around the transformer in the back. It doesn't extend the whole width of the westerly side yard. Next slide. So in terms of the design highlights, that the new proposal, in terms of the building design for the new proposal, we have taller ground floor, which has been designed to easily be converted to other non-residential uses in accordance with the RMU 20 zone. The ground floor units are designed as unique loft-style mezzanine units with direct access to the street level, with private patios and a planter wall for enhanced privacy. We have ample indoor and outdoor bicycle parking to support active transportation. Amenity area in exceedance of the zoning bylaw requirement. Second story private rooftop terraces. And the exposed underground parking garage wall provides increased screening and privacy along the rear property line. And we have enhanced the landscaping to provide a continuous buffer to soften the visual impact of the exposed wall. And I have asked our landscape architect to prepare some renderings of what we will be proposing in terms of that landscape buffer. And next slide, I will show you. So this is one of the renderings, kind of like, so if you look at the fenced area, that's where the transformer will be. And then so this is the initial vegetation screening along the back in that low-rise residential landscape buffer. Next slide. And this is mature screening of what it will look like when the vegetation is mature from the same angle. Next slide. This is just a different perspective. So again, this is what the residents on Karen's Walk will be seeing when they're looking at the building with the exposed parking garage wall. And this would be the initial screening that we would be proposing. And next slide. And this is what it would look at in terms of the mature screening. So those are that's my presentation, and I invite any questions council may have.
Thank you, Jennifer. And what I'll look to is first out of the gate is Councillor Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you. And let me start first, Jennifer, by saying, yeah, thank you for sort of taking us through a detailed review of the application's journey and the learnings and adjustments and highlighting those elements. I think that's a value add for an applicant's presentation over and above the sort of more technical, staff presentation that comes with this. I think the transparency that provides to the planning process and sort of the give and take and the adjustments that sort of can happen through all of that is potentially really helpful for the public. So I appreciate that you've done that here. I haven't seen it done this way to quite this detail before. And thank you also for demonstrating sort of an early and late view of the continuous green buffers. So I've canceled the question about that on your side, recognizing staff will do the review. But I appreciate you just didn't show us like the 20-year growth scenario, because that's not what people will see for the early part of a project. So thank you for both of those. One thing in the technical journey that I didn't quite understand the change for, you talked about initially this was seeking to reduce the front yard to setback to 4 meters rather than go to 5, and then where this has landed is I didn't catch the exact number, but 6 point something. So I don't recall seeing the technical reason for why you've landed at that, because that feels to me like it's pushing the back further back. But maybe you can tell me why it's 6 point. Was it 5.4 or something rather than the 5 meters that's in our bylaw?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Henry. When we started looking at the detailed design of the building and the location of the high water table and the grading, and to provide barrier-free entrances, it was the location of the building was cited based on all of that input from the civil engineer in terms of grading and the geotechnical. So that's kind of where we landed with respect to the design of the building, and where we landed in terms of our setback.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And so the question that I teased that I was going to ask around unit mix, appreciate seeing sort of the mix of ones and twos in there. As you know, when I looked at the floor plan layouts that were in here, it looked like there was a part of the building that might that potentially could be consolidated into 3-bed units, which would change the parking rate and the rest. I know that's something that our chief planner had raised earlier on in the process as well with you folks. And I've seen the answer that you gave to Mr. Cotter, but I thought it would be helpful if you could let me and council and the public understand better why 3-bedroom units aren't something that you considered, or that not that you didn't consider, but that are not part of the proposal here.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Henry. Yes, Joel Cotter did raise the suggestion of combining 2 1-bedroom units at the northwest corner of the building to create 2 or 3-bedroom units. And I did respond to Mr. Cotter. And basically my explanation, there was a lot of factors involved in my explanation. But basically, it would create 5 units over 1,000 square feet. And in this type of build, it's a problem for many reasons. One is that the cost of a unit over 1,000 square feet. So in this type of new build, would be very expensive, and we don't have, like, in this area, there's not a market for this type of unit. So a unit of this size of over 1,000 square feet would cost about $750,000. And people, and unfortunately, it's like we're kind of like, there's a balance between affordability and market. And there's actually, like, there's no market for a 3-bedroom unit that would cost over $750,000. So the people who are seeking a 3-bedroom unit, they're also generally seeking about 1,500 square feet. And they find way better value in a small single detached house, older stock, or a townhome. And the problem is that with these types of units, high construction costs, for new apartments are not the most efficient form of housing for this demand. And again, if we had a 3-bedroom unit and we're marketing it for $750,000, it would never sell. So as a developer, it wouldn't be feasible. So that's one of the reasons why. The other reason I had indicated to Mr. Cotter was that in terms of affordable housing, which we consider in every one of our projects, we look at the region's waiting list on affordability. And from the information that the region has provided, there are more singles and seniors on that waiting list that are looking for subsidized housing as opposed to families. And again, proposing a 3-bedroom unit for a family that, I mean, it's not affordable. So we're proposing small units, 1-bedroom units, that are on the edge of affordability. And I say on the edge because it's very difficult with escalating construction costs and with new construction to provide affordability. So we've looked at, the region has provided us with information on affordability, and for a unit to be for ownership to be deemed affordable, the maximum affordable housing price is, and this is based on old data, 2019, that the region provided, $357,200. So again, in terms of ownership, if we were proposing a 3-bedroom unit at $750,000, there is no market for that. So again, we're proposing smaller units which are more affordable and will meet that ownership threshold. So we're marketing this development to first-time home buyers and for investors. So again, that was the other reason why, you know, in terms of the waiting list that the region has for singles and seniors as opposed to families, and the fact coupled with, if families are looking for affordable housing for larger units, it's not going to be in a new build. It's going to be in existing housing stock because of the high capital cost to build that size of unit in this type of project. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that was a comprehensive recitation of the email, which was that you sent to Joel, which staff shared with me when I asked basically the same question. So I appreciate that detail, and I'll let my colleagues follow up further if they wish to. But I think that's also helpful in the market context for us to understand some of the other side as we go through affordable housing policy and figure out how to drive affordability across different housing types and different household types. In all of that we do have to understand lots of things that we don't necessarily, you know, implicitly understand or get, because that's the part on building it. The market side isn't our world as easy. So I appreciate you taking the time to go through the proponent's rationale.
You're welcome.
And that was it, Councillor Henry? And I think that's true.
Yeah,
I do have a question just on this, Jennifer. And it's a very vague question, but offhand, based on the relief request, it comes across as tight. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's just you know, I haven't really seen it, you know, that much top-down view or anything like that, but it comes across as tight. Maybe you could just address that of, maybe it's just my misconception, but it certainly seems to be a lot of relief requirements, and how you might be thinking of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it comes across tight because we're measuring from the exposed parking garage wall. And those are the variances that the majority of the variances are related directly to that. So we have to measure from the exposed parking garage wall as opposed to measuring from the location of the building. So if you look at the actual setbacks of the building, again, we're at 14, over 14 meters from the rear property line for the actual building. And it's just that exposed parking garage wall because of that zoning regulation that requires retaining walls. And the underground parking garage wall, the exposed part would be considered a retaining wall. We have to measure from that wall. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the requested variances are directly related to that wall. And the reduction of the required parking spaces from the 1.2 spaces to the 0.9. We had a traffic consultant prepare a parking justification study. And because we're proposing smaller units, and based on our market experience, we feel that the 0.9 spaces per unit is justifiable and will actually provide an adequate amount of parking for the type of unit that we were proposing. So we have the parking reduction, and then the other reduction, the other asks are directly related to that underground, the exposed underground parking garage wall. And the reason for the exposed underground parking garage wall is because of that high water table, and we do not want to go below the water table in this area because the cost implications of that would not make this development feasible for anyone.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and certainly we understand high water table is not an unfamiliar term to us here, any of us here. So anyway, thank you very much for that. I do have another question for you from Councillor Bonnegar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Just have a few questions just to satisfy my curiosity, having seen the presentation you've put before us. I'm just curious, how high is the exposed part of that rear underground parking wall? It looks pretty substantial in the images. I'm just wondering how high that's expected to be.
Yes. So the height of the wall, it varies along the property line, from what I term as the church side, from 3.6 meters from the church side, and then it kind of like in terms of the grade, it goes down to 2.1 meters on like closer to the northwest corner of the site. So yeah, it is a substantial wall. We are not, we're not sugarcoating it. But that's why we've spent a lot of time working with the landscape architect to provide landscaping that will soften the exposure of that wall. And the wall also serves to provide a really good screening tool between the apartment, like the surface parking and the rear lots that back onto it. So, there's not going to be any vehicle headlight glare from the cars parked there because the wall shields it. And then over time, the vegetation will, our intent is to have a green wall. It'll be completely covered with plant material.
Okay, that helps, and to help me just again understand the situation. So for residents who would be kind of living at the back of your development per se.
Yeah.
So does the underground parking height, is that in addition to the height of the building? Like, would they in effect be looking at a 7-story building, or is that factored into the 6?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I suppose is the 6 stories measured from the front of the building, or is it from the back of the building where it would essentially deepen to 7 given the underground parking?
So through you, Mayor, the height of the building is measured based on 5 average grade points across the front of the building per the zoning bylaw.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so that helps me. I've just got a couple of more questions. I noticed that you've got 46 indoor and 12 outdoor bike parking spots already included in the plan. Given the number of residents who could potentially live there, do you have a plan to maybe find some spaces for additional bike parking down the track if the need arose?
We have looked at this in a lot of detail because in our previous our previous development, Blackstone, bike parking is actually used a lot from our experience, and based on our Blackstone experience, we're providing quite a bit of bike parking that we feel will adequately serve the development. And we've tucked it into every space we can in the underground parking garage. That's basically been our priority, is to find spaces for bike parking.
Okay.
And the outdoor parking bike spaces will be for visitors, visitor bike parking. Yes.
And that's and just to follow up on the questions that Councillor Henry raised. I mean, I know you gave us a very good explanation on 3 bedrooms, but I'm just wondering about the breakdown between 1s and 2 beds. There seems, it seems to be very heavily weighted towards singles, but I know from residents across my ward that there's quite a lot of, well, people are always discussing the need for units that are more than 1 bedroom. And there's limited housing stock to meet the demand, and we know the region's growing. So I ask this question pretty much of every development that comes in front of me. How did you make that decision between, like, not even to go all the way to 3 beds, but to 2 beds, and to have maybe more of the scope or more capacity for 2-bedroom units rather than just 1s?
I think it really boils down to affordability. And there's more of a market for 1-bedrooms as opposed to 2 bedrooms. And that's a direct relationship to affordability. So for Blackstone, for example, Northfield and Bridge, it's a more suburban location. We had an original concept with 3 buildings, so 3 apartment buildings, and with a larger range of larger 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units. And we decided mid project to redesign it because the 2 3-bedroom units weren't selling. And so we decided to break up the last building, which had larger 2 3-bedroom units, and break it up into 2 smaller buildings, and to provide more 1-bedroom units, smaller 1-bedroom units, because that's what the market demand was. So it's interesting, and it's directly related to affordability. because
And
obviously the larger the unit, the more expensive the unit would be, and they weren't selling.
You may not even be able to answer this question, but just you got me thinking there. The demand, you're saying the lack of demand, is that from investor buyers?
A mix. Yeah, a mix. So we definitely have a large investor interest in the projects, and I would suggest that across the region that there's a large demand. There's a large portion of the units that are purchased by investors. But it's not only investors that are looking for affordability, but it's also first-time home buyers that want to get into the market. And when you create large units, you're pricing those people out from the market.
Okay, well, thank you for that information. I would, it's not within either our power, but it would be great to know if we could differentiate between what investors are willing to pay for and what residents who might be wanting to work from home or one day start a family would be willing to seek. But that is not for us to decide, and that's not for today. So thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
No, excellent discussion here tonight. Thank you all. I don't see any further questions. I'll do a last call to make sure I haven't missed anyone. And with that, thank you, Jennifer. I don't see any further questions for you at this time.
Thank you.
And I'll just check with the deputy clerk to see if there's anybody who has called in recently to say they would like to participate in this discussion or delegate. And we hear there's been nobody calling in. As the deputy clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. Thank you very much, Rita, for your help tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
We now move on to our next item, and essentially last. It's about item 13B. So if you'd like to speak at the public planning meeting occurring now, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705 to be added to the list of delegations. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment Z2107 to remove the holding symbol from 635 Herb Street West and 12 West Hill Drive from LPMR 635 Herb GP Inc. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner, John Voss, at 519-747-8527, and his email address is john.vos@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of this meeting and the dates notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on August 26, 2021, and mailed or emailed on August 24, 2021 to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property and to public agencies. No informal public meeting was held.
Thank you very much. The planner, John Voss, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, John.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm not actually doing a presentation this evening, but I'd be available if anyone has questions that I can answer for them.
That's the best kind of presentation, John. If you'd like to speak to this council meeting, please call the clerk's office at 519-747-8705. I will now call upon the registered delegation to come forward, and that is Carol Wiebe, partner in MHBC. Welcome, Carol.
Good evening, Mayor Jaworski, members of council. Similar to Mr. Voss, I don't have a formal presentation this evening, simply to indicate our support of the staff recommendations. I'm available to answer any questions. I would note that when this original application was brought forward for zoning approval just over 2 years ago, I think the biggest issue that I was at the council meeting, and I think the biggest issue from the surrounding residents and certainly the residents on West Hill was the potential for cut-through traffic. And I would just make council aware that the previous site plan that had been proposed at that time showed both a drive connection to West Haven and also a drive connection on the west side on West Hill. The current proposal being advanced by Lexington Park, while it does have 2 driveways, the westerly one is blocked to any type of through traffic. It will have bollards in place 24/7. Those bollards can only be removed for emergency purposes. So that was proposed in direct response to the concerns about the cut through traffic. And it's obviously a very effective means to do that. We did consult widely with emergency services. The other, I think, important measure in the site is the introduction of a warn-off through the site. And that was really to try and mitigate and minimize vehicular traffic through the site itself. So there was a lot of thought and attention made to try and minimize vehicular traffic on the surrounding street network, as well as vehicular traffic within the site itself. So I think that was the biggest change from the earlier proposal to this one. And we were pleased to see that the residents of 7 West Hill, who had voiced considerable concern, have indicated their support of the recommendations in the paradigm traffic study. So I think we feel we've addressed the the predominant concern with the cut through traffic. I understand that there are still some issues between 7 West Hill and the Tim Hortons, but there will be no traffic from this development that will be able to get over onto West Hill. And then the noise study, as the staff report points out, all the appropriate building material mitigation measures, as well as the noise warning clauses, will be incorporated into the building. So I think both, in my opinion, the requirements for the lifting of the holding provisions have been satisfied. So if there's any specific questions from council, I'll do my best to answer them. And if I can't, I'll defer them to Mr. Voss.
Okay, thank you very much, Carol, and thank you for the added information in lieu of a presentation. Very much appreciated. I'll just check to see if there's any questions for the delegate at this time. Last call. And I don't see any for you, Carol, so thank you very much for presenting, but we do have a member of council who wants a question of staff, so has a question of staff, so please stay tuned. Thank you, Carol. Back over to Councillor Hanmer, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Voss. Thank you for the report and the update, and also, Carol, I should also say thank you for your comments and update as well. I do have just one question regarding the noise study. In the report that you provided to us, there was still some work to be done, and so I just am curious what's happened since the writing of your report and now. Are we complete on that front, and are we satisfied?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hamner. The acoustical engineer has provided an updated study addressing some of the off-site concerns, ensuring that they are within the required limitations, since there's no concerns from that perspective. The only remaining element are some of the building mechanical requirements, and that will be dealt with through the site plan prior to any building permit being issued. And initial indications show that the baffling and sound buffers will more than adequately ensure that any noise from the mechanical equipment on the building won't impact residents inside the building or surrounding land uses. That's the initial expectation, but we will be looking for an updated noise study as part of the site plan.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you for that. And just a comment, if I might, Mayor, the comments made by both Mr. Voss and Ms. Wiebe did indicate, yes, that the residents in 7 West Hill are satisfied as by the letter that we've got. There still are some concerns, and so the hope is that this isn't completely out of sight, out of mind on the part of the city. There has been some assistance provided predominantly by Mr. Voss in helping to address with the residents the issues on 7 and 5 West Hill. So I'm hopeful that that will continue regardless of what we're deciding tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. I will now check with the Deputy Clerk to see if we've had any people call in to delegate tonight. The information that I have is that no one has called in on this item. As the Deputy Clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This formal public meeting is now concluded and the application is open to Council for a motion and debate. I will look to my ward councillor for that.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm happy to make the motion to approve the application, whereas Council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas Council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that Council approve staff report IPPW 2020-054, and secondly, that zoning bylaw amendment Z-21-07 for 635 Herb Street West and 12 West Hill Drive be approved in accordance with Section 5 of IPPW 2021-054 report.
Just one moment. I'm just going to check with the planner on this because I noticed that line 1 mentions IPPW 2020-054. Line 2 mentions IPPW 2021-054. I just want to make sure that they are correct, that they are distinctly different. Oh, wait, I see on the screen here it's 2021-054.
Yeah, so do I. I just noticed that too, Mayor.
Yeah, that was just a typo in the thing that was sent to you. So the Council approved staff report IPPW 2021-054 is what it should read.
Correct.
Awesome. Okay, and we'll look for a seconder from your neighbor.
Councillor Bodley, I will, excuse me, I will second that motion.
Excellent, and we'll just listen in for any debate coming in from Council. Hearing none, I suggest we start the voting with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, John, for shepherding this through. Thank you very much, Carol, for your and your partner's participation in all of this.
Thank you, Council. We appreciate your support.
So as we come down here, I see any item 18. We'll skip down to questions. Does any council member have questions of staff that they'd like to mention tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 19, new business. Does anyone have any new business they'd like to mention? Hearing none, we'll move on to that joyous part of the night where we enact some bylaws. And we actually have two sets tonight. You have actually two chances if you want to jump in on the moving of the bylaws. And the first one is the third reading of the franchise agreement between the Corporation of City Waterloo and Enbridge Gas. And then we'll do the other ones separately. Is there anybody who would like to move on the bylaws?
Pick me, please.
Councillor
It's
Freeman,
Councillor
you go
Freeman.
first. Okay, you've moved bylaws
Move the bylaws as printed.
and you'd like to vote, I bet.
I vote in favor.
And we'll go to your neighbor. Well, I guess your ward neighbor.
Councillor Henry, I'd be happy to second this bylaw and vote in favor.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Then we have another set of bylaws, A through F, on the subsequent page. Does anybody want to get in on the fun on that one?
It's Councillor Hanmer. I'm happy to move bylaws A through F as printed, and I'll vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley, I'll second the bylaws and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
The mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. We move on to item 21, that favorite time of day, known as adjournment. Would anybody like to move adjournment?
Councillor Freeman, I move to adjourn and I vote in favor.
Councillor Henry seconds the motion to adjourn and votes in favor.
And Councillor Bonagor is in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much, and look forward to hearing or seeing from you in the near future.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Night.